All right, I'm going to be getting started here in just a minute, but I just want to make sure everybody in the room can hear me okay. I don't need a mic or anything. Typically, I even get a little bit louder as I get more animated. But so, in our presentation today, this is going to be far more targeted towards understanding retirement benefits. It'll be less specific on like your actual retirement benefits. We all get that? Are we all kind of okay with that? Tomorrow I'm doing some presentations that will be targeted a lot more to teachers and their retirement benefits and kind of what to expect. We're going to be going over today the differences in retirement benefits, how they work to create or how they work combined holistically so that you can better plan for your retirement. Also, helping your students understand a little bit of what they should be considering as any of you are teaching those classes and speaking with them about that. We're good with that today? Yep. All right. Fantastic. So the first thing I like to go over, and I try to get people to understand, I'm a retirement and financial planning advisor with the state of Utah. So what our company does, I work for URS, and within our department, we help individuals better plan for retirement with the primary goal that we have of making sure that they're on track to meet their retirement lifestyle. I've been with URS for about 16 years now. I've met with hundreds of people individually, and I have done as well hundreds of different presentations on retirement topics. What I like to focus on anytime I'm meeting with someone, and this is a simple concept, but sometimes we don't think about this. Many people I meet with have this idea that retirement is the goal of retiring from something. From waking up every morning and coming into a class, retiring from your students or a job you don't like or a boss you don't like. And what we try to do is shift people's thinking to get them instead thinking about retiring to something. The idea of what are you going to do in retirement. I want to ask in general here, and I ask a lot of questions, so please participate and throw out whatever answer you may think. But when I meet with people, one of the first questions and topics that we talk about, or question that I like to ask is, well, when are you planning on retiring, or when would you like to retire? What do you think the number one answer is when I ask someone, when would you like to retire?
Now.
As soon as possible, right? Or now. So what's funny is they come in and they meet with me, and the first thing they're thinking is, I would like to retire as soon as possible. My answer is always to say, well, you can retire today if you don't mind living out of your car, eating top ramen, right? A lot of people do it, you know. So the real question is, what are you planning on doing in retirement? And are you going to be provided an income to fulfill those goals or that lifestyle? Okay? Whenever we actually look at retirement and we look at the fact of, or we address the question of what we'd like to do in retirement, most people have some type of understanding of what it is they'd like to do. It might be volunteering more. It may be starting a second career that's more fulfilling, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever it may be. They want to spend more time with family. They might want a vacation, okay? Any of these things are going to require what? If we quit our jobs? Income, right? It's going to require income. We're going to need a way to pay our bills as we enter that next stage of our life. As we look at income, everyone here familiar with the term, the three-legged stool? Who has never heard that term before? We've all heard that term? Fantastic. Oh, no, okay. So when we look at the three-legged stool in finance, what we're addressing are our three sources of income. Now, is everyone going to have these three sources of income? Absolutely not. But when we look at those, that creates a very, very strong retirement foundation. As we look at these three income sources, we have Social Security, we've got your employer paid benefit. So for some of us, that's going to be a pension. For others, it may just be a 401k match or contribution. And then that third leg of the stool is what we do individually, deferring pay so that we can spend that later in retirement. I'm going to talk today a lot more about the employer paid benefit and your retirement savings plans and options. But just to stick on Social Security real quick, how many of us here are coming from another school district outside of the state? Are we all? Okay, a couple. What states? Nevada. Okay, where are you?
I came from Iowa.
From Iowa? Okay, Nevada and Iowa, do they pay into Social Security taxes? Does Nevada?
No idea.
You don't know? Okay, I don't think Nevada does. I could be wrong. I know CalSTRS doesn't. I know Illinois doesn't.
I knew when I was in Missouri, it was.
Okay, so what I'm getting at here is this is unique. Okay, it's very unique. Now, in the state of Utah, every single person here who works for a school district pays FICA taxes. Those FICA taxes go to fund your Social Security benefit and they go to fund your Medicare benefits that you'll get at retirement. There are several states whose school district employees, California I know for sure being one, Illinois I know for sure being one, and I even think Nevada is Social Security exempt as well. They don't pay into Social Security, and what that means is you potentially could be getting a statement every single year saying here's what your Social Security benefit is going to be, and then when you retire, they find out you have a public pension. Now that public pension could be a pension, it could be a 401k contribution. The IRS doesn't care, you don't get out of it by exempting out of a pension and taking a 401k contribution. They do all of their math. Either way, if you're getting something from your public employer and you exempt it out of Social Security, then your Social Security benefit is going to be reduced. Within the state of Utah, we actually have several public employers that are Social Security exempt. If you have any friends, family members, siblings who might work for like UPD, Unified Police, or Unified Fire, any of you coming from Alpine, Provo, Nebo School District, a lot of those Utah County public employers have exempted out of paying Social Security taxes. Why does an employer do that? Well, because then the employer doesn't have to pick up their half of Social Security. Now, the benefit to you is that you're not paying that tax either. That tax that everyone pays, all school district employees pay, nobody's exempt from that in the state of Utah, is 6.2%. So if you know anyone who's exempted out, they should at least be contributing 6.2% of their own money into the 401k because they're not paying that towards Social Security. And when they try to draw that benefit is going to be reduced. That benefit can be reduced a maximum of about $570. So if they're getting a statement that shows them it's $1,200 or $1,300, they might only be getting $700 or $800. Okay? So I'd like us to understand where these income sources come from and the fact that there are going to be many people who don't have all of these sources of income. What do we have control over? Can any of us call up Social Security and start paying into Social Security to maximize our benefit? No, we cannot. Can you call up URS and say, hey, I want to maximize my pension. Can I pay some money into that? Will we take any payments? No, we won't. What are you in control of? Only your retirement savings accounts, right? Increasing and putting money into that. We'll talk about some strategies and how to do that as we go forward a little bit here. Two things I want to discuss and make sure that we completely understand are the differences and how these benefits are going to work. Social Security is actually just like a pension. Anyone here know how Social Security works? A really, really good understanding and definition of how it works? No? Anyone know what Social Security costs? What do we pay into Social Security? What was it? Yell it. Okay, we pay 6.2% in. Our employer pays 6.2% in. So that benefit, Social Security, costs 12.4%. We're paying 12.4%, and then the government gives us a benefit. That's how a pension works. If there's something I can help us to understand how a pension differs from a 401k, it's actually really, really simple. When we look at pensions, who carries the risk of the pension? Do you guys carry the risk of it? You do not, right? When we look at a pension, we pay into that. So we're picking up and we're paying our 6.2%. And the government is saying, we are taking on that risk. We are going to make sure that we take that money and we invest it, and we're fiscally responsible so that we have enough money in that trust so that we can pay you out in this case, for Social Security and URS pension, a lifetime benefit. Now, what does that mean? Again, they're taking on that risk. So if you end up living to 120 years old, they're saying, we're taking on that responsibility. We don't think you'll live that long. We actually hope you don't live that long, but we're going to take on that responsibility and we promise to pay it out for that amount of time. They're also saying, we're going to take this money and we know that if you just give us 6.2%, there's no way in the world we're going to have enough money to pay you out a benefit for 30 years or 20 years of retirement. But we're going to take that and we're going to invest it, and we assume growth and rates of return so that we can pay that out. So when we look at a pension, the easiest thing to understand is that the risk is put on the administrator of that benefit. And we hope that they're managing it responsibly, right? Anyone know about Social Security and how well they're being managed right now?
Not good.
Not good, right? Anyone know why Social Security isn't doing as well as you'd think that they'd be doing? Anyone have any idea?
Healthcare.
It's actually not healthcare. They're two different subsets. People are living a lot longer than it was originally created at, right? If you actually look at when it was created, the benefit started at 65 and life expectancies were like at 71. Okay? People are living a lot longer. Now, one of the other really, really big factors of why Social Security isn't doing as well, actually, what was that?
Slow population.
So there's less revenues coming in, but it actually has to do with their investment structures. The federal government is actually, I guess I would just to simplify it say, they're not allowed to invest in stocks. They're not allowed to invest in any type of products outside of the bonds that they lend. So they're not getting great rates of return, and they haven't been getting great rates of return for a very, very long time. And that is a significant factor as to why it's struggling so much. I would hope that in the future they may adjust that, but at the same time, we don't want the federal government investing and propping up certain things, right? So they kind of have their hands tied. It's a little bit more difficult for them. But ideally, for anyone here who's worried about Social Security, anyone know when their balance or their account is going to be bankrupt? It's pretty soon. About 2037. It fluctuates a little bit, but they're saying by about 2037, they anticipate, that was what I had just read, that they will be, anyone know, at $0 in that trust. $0 in that trust. Now, is that something that we should be really, really concerned and worried about? Well, you can worry about it if you like. I decide and choose just not to. In the 80s, the same thing happened. They made some changes. They extended the full retirement age from 65 to 67. Doing that, they've been paying out full benefits from the 80s until now, so that helped them out for about 40 years. Okay? The other thing is, if you look up Social Security, it's not all doom and gloom. Okay? Social Security says through their revenues, so that 6.2% that we're paying in, that 6.2% that we hope our kids pay in, through those revenues, they can pay 80% of your stated benefit for 100 years. Now, it's not 100% of your benefit, but if your benefit were $2,000, they are committing and saying they can pay you $1,600 every month forever because of their revenues. That's not bad. Again, it ain't $2,000 like we'd hope for, but we know we're going to get something. It isn't that just because they hit a zero balance, they now won't no longer have money and they just close their doors. They're saying that they need something to change to really help that revenue so that they can pay out 100% of that benefit. Okay? So it's not all doom and gloom for Social Security. So when we look at the pension, it's a lifetime guaranteed income stream. We say guaranteed because it's based on a formula, not on market returns. So it doesn't matter where the economy is at, you're promised that benefit and it gets paid out. Okay? When we look at 401ks, I love this. I promise you, and maybe some of you have even had these thoughts, but I have people who come in and they say, well, I need to roll my money out of my existing account that I have somewhere else. And they make a really, really funny statement when they're saying this. They say, I'm going to roll my money out. Maybe it was at Fidelity or Merrill Lynch, or I taught at another school district. I want to roll it out and bring it to URS. Why? Well, because they're not managing my money well. My money isn't growing there. My investments aren't doing well. Who is in charge of the 401k?
You are.
Is URS in charge of that?
No.
No, right? You decide how you're going to invest that. You decide how aggressive you want to be, how risky you want to be, or how conservative you want to be. So it's always a funny statement because I get people who come in and I tell them, hey, we got plans that don't do as well either. If you put it in our cash fund, you're only going to see a 2% rate of return annually on that. You'll never see it higher. Doesn't matter what the economy or the stock market's doing. You're in charge of that investment. So when we look at a 401k, and the difference between the 401k and any pension is that with the 401k, you are taking on the risk. You have to make sure that your money is growing at a rate that when you retire, there's a large enough balance there for you to survive on in retirement, so that you have some type of monthly income to spend from that. But we've got to remember, we're in charge of this. Don't come to URS after 25 years of not ever looking at your balance and then saying, hey, it never grew. What'd you guys do with my money? And we say, it's always been your money. I mean, we manage it, we record keep for it, but you decide how you want to invest it. Right? You've got all of those options. Anyone here use the URS, the Charles Schwab account? Anyone here have heard of that account? That's the account. If you've got enough money, you can open a Charles Schwab. It allows you to buy individual stocks if you want. You've got all of those options. That's on you. That's not on us. We provide it. We record keep. We hold on to that. You log in to see it. But it's your responsibility to make sure that you're going to have enough at retirement. That doesn't rest on our shoulders. That's the differences here between a pension benefit and a retirement savings account. Okay? Really quickly, just to show you kind of a breakdown and where incomes come from in retirement, if we're looking at a pension, if I'm in the tier 1 system, right, what's my multiplier? What do I get?
2%.
2% for every year that I work. We don't cap that, right? I met with a guy 2 years ago. He had 56 years in the system. 56. We still gave him 2%. We're paying him 112% of what his salaries are. Now, he was 82 and a half years old. Do you think that we care we're paying him 112%? No, we're not paying that out much longer, right? I don't know. I shouldn't make that statement. But we don't care, okay? This is how most pension systems work. There's a multiplier. You take whatever the average salary is of your 3 or 5 or 10-year average salary, and then you're guaranteed a monthly income. This is the formula, and this is how the Tier 1 system works. 2% means if I put in 10 years, I get 20%. If I put in 20 years, I get 40%. If I put 30 years, I get 60% of my pay, right? In the Tier 2 system, that had to be reduced because of costs, right? Employers didn't want to spend as much. And so we reduced the multiplier from 2% to 1.5. So now, if I put in 10 years, I get 15% of the average of my pay. If I put in 20 years, I get 30. If I put in 30 years, I get 45. This benefit still is not bad. Now, what we found, or at least individually, what I found for this benefit, okay, the one big difference here, when I meet with people, we record keep. I actually do all of the record keeping for our department. There's 16 of us. I run all the databases that keep track of this. As we're running, and as I do averages here for all the Tier 2 people that we're meeting, we're still finding that Tier 2 employees, on average, are replacing right around 100% of their income, if not more. Just like our Tier 1 people. What do we think the difference is in the Tier 2 system? The one difference. It's not the average 5 highest years, because they're still replacing right around the same amount that our Tier 1 people are replacing when we look at that on average. The difference is, and we may not want to hear this as a Tier 2 individual, but it's the fact that they're just working longer. How many of us know somebody in the Tier 1 system who decided to retire out at 52 or 53 or 55 years old? That just isn't really a possibility, or it's less of a possibility to happen in the Tier 2 system. But it doesn't mean that the Tier 2 system is a bad benefit, okay? What we see here again, hey, if you put in 30 or 35 years, you're replacing almost or right around 50% of your pay. That's just from your pension. Social Security on average at your full retirement age, so most of us here in this room, that's going to be 67. Social Security is going to replace right around 25 to 40% of our income, depending on what our income is. The more money we make, the less Social Security replaces. It benefits lower income individual. For teachers, on average, it's replacing about 25% of your pay. So if this is replacing 50%, and then Social Security is going to replace another 25%, 30%, well, then you're only about 20, 25% shy. We don't have to have millions of dollars in our 401k to supplement that difference there, okay? But on average, and kind of in general, this is how pension systems work. Again, Social Security is absolutely no different than this. Social Security is based on a structure to replace whatever your income is. Do you know what the average salary or what the Social Security's formula is and what salaries they use to calculate out their benefit? Your top salaries? It's your top 35 year salaries that they use to calculate out a benefit for you, okay? They're actually pretty generous in how they do it. If you go online and you watch a video, you'll see that it's actually a lot more generous than you think, because they inflate your salaries. So a salary that you may have earned in the 80s, and maybe that salary was $25,000, they look at all of the impacts of inflation from the 80s until the present, and that $25,000 could be worth $65,000 to you today. And then they average, after all of those inflationary factors, they average that and pay you up.
Is that partly why you get so much more money if you wait until 67?
No, for Social Security, you actually do not get so much more money delayed, right? The idea is if I drew it, let's just say, if I'm drawing at 62 or 67, that difference in their benefit is right around 38%. If I take it at 62, it's 38% less than what I get at 67. And so what happens is, if we were to put it in a calculator, anybody could do this if you went to Excel. But if you took that amount and you put in like a national life expectancy of living to 81 or 82, what you'll find out is they're paying out about the same amount. You're getting 5 years less of payments, right? If you wait until you're 67, that's why they can pay you more. You've deferred that benefit for 5 years. So that's really how that works. And on average, if you look at average life expectancies, it tends to be a wash. Doesn't matter when you take it. But for anyone in here who thinks you're going to live to be 90 or something, you should probably delay. You get more dollars doing that. Okay.
I was just, when they're determining the salary, assuming, I'm speaking for like non-teachers or people that jump around from job to job, is that based on your income tax return?
It is based on really what is reported. If you go,
Do you mean though reported on your tax return?
it should be. But
Is it your adjusted gross? Like what is that?
no, this is usually going to be based on whatever your gross income is.
Okay.
And you would get, if you logged into, if you went to SSA.org and you set up an account, I did this years ago, any of you can do it as long as you have more than 10 years of employment, there's going to be a record of the salaries that they're using for your benefit.
Okay.
And you want to make sure that those look correct. They are wrong on occasion because it is reporting from your employer. So sometimes an employer just might forget to report you. That happens.
Like what if you're an entrepreneur? Like what if you're self-employed?
Then you have to, so if we're self-employed, that's totally different, but it's a great question. If I'm self-employed, what do you think I'd have to do in order to get the Social Security benefit?
Well, you pay into it like with your self-employment tax, like your Schedule C or whatever.
Yep. Mhm.
But I guess I'm not filing a separate salary table.
No,
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But that form that I fill with my taxes is sufficient.
That form that you have for your taxes should be sufficient. And as a self-employed person, you have to, even though it's just you have to pick up the employee portion of 6.2% and the employer portion of the 6.2%. That's why there's such a big reduction if you're reporting that. There are some self-employed people who don't report it. They can choose to do that.
It'll affect them later, right?
It's going to affect them. They're not going to.
It's deferred, whatever.
Right, correct. Yeah, it's deferred compensation is how they look at it, and you're just going to have a lower Social Security benefit because you weren't reporting anything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. When we talk about Social Security. Any questions on the pensions or pension benefits, how they work? Great. So let's talk a little bit about employer paid savings here. Or sorry, your savings, the 401k plans, and why we should be funding this. There are a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons right now going on is this third bullet point, which is inflation. Anyone have a friend or family member who retired a couple of years ago that you're talking to now that's telling you about the impact that inflation is having on their income? That they retired, they thought when they retired they could make all of their payments, they could pay all of their bills, and now they're feeling that struggle, right? When we talk about why you should be saving, okay, we look at flexibility here. When I'm meeting with people, I tell people the main reason why you should be saving into your 401k is so that you are in control of your retirement. So that you can retire on your terms. It's also going to help out with supplemental income. And there's tax savings. I'm going to talk about tax savings in a second here for different plans. But supplemental retirement income here. I meet with a ton of people who tell me, well, for example, I make $100,000 right now. When I retire, I'm going to be making like $65,000. I'm okay with that. My home is going to be paid off. I'm going to be debt-free. My kids are going to be out of the house. So I feel like I can survive on $65,000 a year, especially because my house is paid off, that bill or payment is $1,700 a month, so I should be fine. Let me ask a question here. What is Medicare going to cost us when we retire and we turn age 65? Anyone have any idea what Medicare B's premium is?
My parents are paying like $250 apiece.
Okay? Okay. That's good. Anyone know the exact dollar amount of what Medicare costs? No one does?
Basic Medicare is free. It's all the supplements that are relevant that it's gonna cost you.
Okay, so basic Medicare is free. Medicare A is free.
That
Okay? Medicare A covers hospital stays. Okay? Medicare B provides you medical insurance like we're all familiar with. This covers us so that we can go and get an annual checkup, or if I cut my finger and I need to go in and I need to get it stitched, Medicare A doesn't cover that. It's only hospital stays. So I would need Medicare B to cover that broken finger, or if I cut myself and I need it stitched. And Medicare B costs $170 a month right now per person. So if I'm married, that's about $340. Medicare, okay, and I'll say this, I wish my father-in-law and my mother-in-law just retired. And my wife told me they thought they were covered. And my mother-in-law went in and had multiple dental procedures completed, thinking that her Medicare was going to cover that. Medicare doesn't cover dental, vision, or hearing. So she had to walk away and pay out of pocket. And anyone here who has ever had dental procedures done uninsured will know how bad it is and how much it costs. Your dental procedures are ridiculous, okay? So you've got to get a dental plan. A dental plan is typically going to be another $50 per person. So now we're up to $450. As we heard the young man back here state, you've also, if you've got the money, you want to go with the supplemental coverage. Why? Here's a big one for medical insurance. Medicare covers 80-20. That's great. Most of your employers probably cover 80-20, right? There aren't too many employers that still cover 100% anymore. Here's the difference. If I go in today, most of us are going to be familiar with this if I'm on traditional coverage. If I broke my hip or something and I got to go in and it's surgery and it's a $100,000 bill. It's 80-20 coverage, but do I pay $20,000 out of pocket? Why not?
Your deductible and then a percentage.
It's your deductible and then it's a percentage, but then it's what is called an out-of-pocket max. Most of us are going to be familiar with that. That says once you hit $3,000, it's covered 100%. You don't have to worry anymore. With Medicare, do they have an out-of-pocket max? No. They do not. So I'm paying $20,000 on that $100,000 bill. And then if I sprain my ankle, as soon as I get out, I got to go in and I've got to pay 20% on that bill. And then if I need a prescription, I've got to pay 20% on that bill. This is where the supplemental coverages come in. I met with a couple of years ago who worked over at the landfill off of Utah 111 highway over there in West Jordan. And they told me after pricing everything for their supplemental plan and their health insurance and their dental coverage, they were going to be paying over $900 a month for health insurance at 65.
Per person or just?
Total.
Okay,
Total.
Okay, so.
Okay? So this is where our savings really, really helps us as supplemental retirement income. We cannot look at retirement and say, well, I'm not going to have a car payment. That'll be paid off by then, so I should be okay. Or my house is going to be paid off, so I should be okay. Or I'm not going to have that freeloading kid with us anymore, so I should be okay. Those costs are still going to exist somewhere. So this is why I encourage people to save what they can. Oh, next here, as we look at our plans, how many of us are familiar with Roth accounts? How many of us, and be honest with your hand up, how many of us have been told that the Roth plans are the best place to save and use for retirement? Okay. How many of us believe that because of the tax savings? Okay, so here's one thing to consider. We call these plans here on the left traditional plans. So that's what I'll be referring to, traditional and Roth plans. Traditional plans say what? I'm deferring taxes now, and then I have to pay my taxes later down the road. With the Roth, we're saying, I will pay the taxes now, and down the road in retirement, I don't have to pay any taxes. And for a lot of people, that sounds great, and that can make sense. But here's the big question. Some of us, not all of us, but some of us are going to be married in this room. How well is your spouse planning for their retirement? If between me and my spouse, we're making $200,000 right now in income, and in retirement, we know we're going to see a reduction in our income, and we may only be making $100,000. Should I be paying taxes on my money when we're making $200,000 and we're in a 24 to 27% tax bracket?
But if you are anticipating if you're seeing 15%
Growth?
on your stocks, then
Okay.
then it is advantageous.
So,
Assuming that you have diversification and you have a lot of money in there.
okay.
Right? Isn't that the justification?
So technically, if I'm saving $100 into the 401k and $100 into the Roth account, and that's my only option there, then yeah, the Roth account would be better. But because of the tax savings, again, if I'm making $200,000, I could put $100 into the Roth, or I could put $125 into my 401k, and my net paycheck is reduced the exact same. That additional $25 at the same interest rate and across multiple contribution periods means that at retirement, I'm going to have a larger account balance in my 401k than my Roth. And then when we factor in the fact that I probably am going to be, this is where it only makes sense if at retirement we're in that lower tax bracket, is to say, yes, I have to pay 18 or 15% taxes on that 401k account, but I still have more dollars after paying those taxes than I do in that Roth. Okay? That makes sense. Here's another simple way to look at it. Aside from federal taxes that we've been talking about, what other tax do I have to pay on my contribution? State tax. Now, if I know I'm retiring to Costa Rica or Thailand or Florida, what are my state taxes there? Do I pay state taxes? No, because you pay state tax in the state you reside in, not the state that's paying you out the benefit. So I'm saying, if I go with the Roth account, that every contribution, I'm going to pay 4.5% state tax when I know at retirement, I'm moving to a state that isn't going to charge me any tax. That means I'm automatically and 100% every time losing 4.5% of that contribution when I know that my goal is to move back to my home state. Maybe it's Nevada, maybe it's Washington, maybe it's Texas, maybe it's Florida. So the Roth account makes sense when we consider our taxes and our combined income.
But for teachers, we're not usually getting very high tax brackets.
So that could be true, that could be wrong. Like I said, it's combined taxes. There are some teachers, I can't speak for everyone, but there are teachers who have spouses who have significantly high incomes. They're self-employed or whatever it may be. Well, you're combining that. And so again, the idea is together you're making $200,000 a year. In most of those cases, when I'm meeting with people, that spouse who's higher income, do they have a great retirement? No, they're not really planning for retirement. They might have $100,000 saved or something like that. But it's a lot harder to replace that $100,000 or $200,000 income than it is to replace your 50 or 60. I'm not saying you guys make that, but I'm saying in general, it's harder to replace a $200,000 income than a $50,000 income, right? And so you have to combine those things. And that's where we see most people combine making 200 grand, But in retirement, they're anticipating they're gonna be making $100,000. And that's where the Roth doesn't make sense. Pay your taxes when you're in a lower tax bracket, okay?
How's your pension tax? Social Security in Utah, we've got tax Social Security, right?
Correct. So Utah is one of the worst states to retire in. I love Utah. I'm probably going to retire anyway. But Utah doesn't offer any incentives for retirement. So your retirement income is taxed just like earned income. Shockingly, a lot of people don't know that. There are a lot of states that have far higher taxes on income, but they're generous to retirees. Why? Because they're getting free money without you taking a job. You're not taking away anything. All you're doing is adding income. So they welcome you and they give you tax breaks for that. Utah doesn't do that yet. So your retirement income, Social Security, pension, 401k withdrawals are going to be taxed federal and state. No FICA taxes, and then there's no other deductions withheld. There's Medicare deductions from your Social Security benefit, but that's it. Nothing else is taken out. Okay. Any other questions on that? Great question. Okay, so these are our different plans. Make sure we understand how each of those plans work. This slide here, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, but it's showing us the time value of money, allowing yourself over a long period of time to save, and really the impact of delaying that by 10 years. Now, I don't know, I can't speak for anyone in here, but how many of us, when we're 25 years old, we're saving 15% of our pay, putting that right into our 401k because we're worried about retirement, and we knew that was something that we had to worry about. Cover, right? Most of us don't do that. I share a story. My first job, my first main job, real job, I went and I worked at FedEx. And at FedEx, when I started, everybody told me, you got to go and talk to this guy. He was a retiree from Merrill Lynch. I still remember his name was Pat Carney. He had worked at Merrill Lynch for like 30 years. He retired. He had millions of dollars. They said, sit down with him, have him help you plan for retirement. I sat down from him across from a table. We logged in, and he said, and this was just, he was just a package hand. He was just working part-time for health benefits at that point. But he said, hey, if you want to retire a millionaire, you got to save 15% of your pay. I said, absolutely, I want to have millions of dollars when I retire. Let's do it. I put in 15%. A year later, my wife and I got married. A year after that, we had our child. At that point, she said, I'm going to stay home. She said, you can't save 15% anymore. And I said, well, that makes sense. And I zeroed it out. 5 years later, we bought our first house. Retirement savings was still $0. A year after that, I decided I was going to go back to school. I withdrew all the money that I put in. Took the penalty, paid the taxes to help cover my school costs, right? We all got to live. I understand. I'm not saying, hey, if you weren't saving enough or you're not saving 15% today, that you're a bad investor, you're not prepared for retirement. Well, what I like to illustrate with this slide is that whatever excuses that we had in the past, don't let that delay you today. If you can save, save. If you can increase what you're saving, increase what you're saving. Let me show you here. This slide's going to be hard to read, so I have to explain it. But one of the biggest rebuttals that I always hear from people, and think about this, we may have spouses that fall into this category, and they say, well, I don't save because my employer doesn't offer a match. Well, so why should I save? My employer doesn't give me any type of retirement benefit, so I'm not going to bother putting anything in. This slide, although it's very, very difficult for us to see, shows us kind of the ups and downs of the market. And what this is illustrating is if I took $10,000 and I put it into an S&P 500 index 30 years ago in 1990, that 30 years later, that $10,000 with no additional contributions would be valued at over $113,000. Over $103,000 of growth on that $10,000 contribution. That is the impact of compound interest. That is the benefit of time. That's why we want to try to make our contributions as soon as possible, and it doesn't matter whether our employer is offering a match or not. we should be saving and using the market to grow. We don't want to put that money in a savings account. We don't want it under our mattress because we understand that inflation is killing it. 5 or 6 years ago, if I went to go get some gas, if I had $100, I probably could have got 4 tanks of gas. Today, or during periods of higher inflation than even it's at today, we know I'd only be getting 2, 1.5 tanks of gas. We lose that value, okay? But this is a big one that I always have to rebuttal. People don't make contributions, and then I say, why are you not saving? And their first thing is to say, oh, am I missing out on a match? Well, no, but you should be saving for retirement. The second one I get, and this is a big one, a lot of people feel that they're a little bit too old to start saving at this point. What this illustrates is a basic principle that I try to teach to everyone. And this is saying if I'm 50 years old and I start saving 1% of my income, just 1%. If I'm 50 years old, I start saving that 1%. Next year, my employer gives me a raise, right? We all get raises, even though we may think we don't. And my employer says, hey, I'm going to give you a 3% cost of living adjustment, or a merit increase, or you receive a step or a lane increase. Now I'm increasing my contribution from 1% to 2%. And then the next year, I increase it another percent, so I'm saving 3%. And then the next year, I'm saving 4%. What this shows us is that from age 50 to age 65, I could potentially have an additional $90,000 saved in my account. Now, many of us may not think $90,000 is a lot. If somebody bought a new truck, they're saying that's halfway, not even halfway to that. But what $90,000 provides you in retirement is an additional $300 a month in income. That's pretty significant. An extra $300 a month in income is $3,600 a year. That's a nice vacation that you have by increasing your contributions. Okay, I share this with a lot of people. And it's the idea of saying, let's go back to me. 16 years ago, I started at URS. Okay? If we can all look back to what we were making 16 years ago, I was making $11.70. I started saving 2.5% of my money. That was all I could afford. I make a lot more now. I should not be saving 2.5% of my money. That's never going to replace my income. As my income grows, right, I start to outpace my balance. We need to increase our contributions as our pay increases. That's the only way that we're going to replace our income. And we're not too old to do this. What's the other benefit of doing this, okay? For anyone who isn't prepared. The other really, really nice thing about this is, again, I'm saying I'm starting at 50 at 1%. I increase it by 1% every year. So by 65, how much of my income am I saving? Yell it out. 15%. That means if I'm making $100,000, how much am I living on annually? $85,000. Well, if my pension is going to replace 40 or 50% of my pay, and Social Security is going to replace another 25% of my pay, how much of the $100,000 am I replacing? Roughly about $70,000 or $75,000. I'm only living on $85,000. That's going to seem a lot more comfortable because I'm saving and putting money away into this 401k. And then when I retire, I don't need to worry about that anymore. I can live on that full $70,000 income I have pre-tax, right, or before taxes.
Until you hit 73.
Till you hit 73, and then we're required to make withdrawals, right? But yeah. So that's another big benefit of doing this. You're increasing what you're saving, so you're living on less of your money, okay? A lot of people ask me, how should I invest? Anyone here familiar with target date funds? I would hope you are. Target date funds have become industry standard. I love target date funds. What I like about target date funds, if we don't know, they are actively managed. What does that mean? Anyone here do investment training? What does it mean to be actively managed?
somebody's actually looking at it and deciding how they need to be invested so they grow at a certain rate.
There you go. Fantastic. Fantastic. What's the importance of it being actively managed? It's being watched by someone, not me. I don't care about watching that stuff. It's being actively managed. That means 5 years ago, this account wasn't diversified this way. They're changing it as they predict markets are going to react or act to different conditions economically, right? Whether it's domestic or international. And they make changes to this. And as they do that, right, it's benefiting me because I don't want to keep track of what's going on in certain markets. So I love that. I said it, and then I forget. You guys remember that infomercial? Who's old enough? We remember the info. It was the stupid timer thing and the personal. It was the set it and forget it thing, right? That's what our target date funds do. Now, what I like about the target date funds as well is that over time, they become more conservative. We move you out of stocks and put you more into bonds. Why is that important? Because at some point it becomes about the preservation of your income. And it's not about making money anymore. The preservation becomes far more important, okay? The one thing I want to leave you with, if anyone here ever heard of the term when we're looking at risks, right? So there's investment risk, there's, what's the other one that has to do with, there's regulation risk, right? Anyone here heard of market of return risk? Market of return risk. What that says is, depending on where the market is when you retire, it's going to impact how long you have that money. So if I retire and within the first 5 years of my retirement, we hit a recession sometime in that retirement and I'm taking money out, that impacts the lifetime of that money that I have to spend. But if I'm taking money out and I can go 5 or 10 years with positive growth before I see that negative growth, I have a far larger balance, right? So this protects us from that by moving us more into bonds and shifting us out of stocks. And so my last kind of question here as we go through this in preservation of our income, I like to ask this question. This will be my last question. I'll open it up to questions and let you guys go. But if I have an account balance of $10,000 and I experience in year one a market growth of 50%, and then in year two, I see a market loss of 50%. Do I have more money, less money, or an equal amount of money? What do we think?
Less.
Less? Everyone says less? The answer is we have less, right? Don't matter how we skin that cat. If I've got $10,000 and I see a 50% increase, it gives me $15,000. If I then see a 50% decrease, that takes me down to $7,500. It doesn't matter how we skin that cat. It doesn't matter if we take the losses first and then we get the gains after. We always, if we don't know this about investing, we always feel the losses worse. Always. Okay? And that's why it's important for us to preserve our income. And this is why I really like target date funds. Target date funds have become industry standard. If you have an account through Fidelity, Robinhood, E-Trade, Merrill Lynch, doesn't matter where they're at, they all offer target date funds now. And I like them for that purpose. And this, of course, is, I'm talking about long-term investing. For any of you who want to go and invest in Bitcoin or gold or Tesla or something, that's a totally different aspect of investing. This is retirement and long-term investing. And target date funds work very, very well in that aspect. Okay. Any questions for me before I let you go? Sorry, kind of went over a couple of minutes, but.
Those are what are used for like 529s as well, right?
Correct. 529s are going to have target date funds. Usually they default into that. But a lot of times once you have a certain balance, then you can choose, they open up, you'll have a little bit more options to invest in, and then you can choose how you want that money invested.
I just was gonna ask, because I had somebody come in and we invested into 403B.
Uh-huh.
I mean, like, my understanding was like I had to do that.
Yeah, so you didn't have to do it. You never had to do it. 403Bs uniquely are offered by insurance companies Now, those companies, they may also be investment firms, so Fidelity offers 403Bs, okay? But they're backed by insurance companies because a 403B, a lot of people don't understand what they do, but they have a provision built into them that says at retirement, you can annuitize that money. Meaning if I've saved $150,000 at retirement, I can take it out, I can withdraw it, I can manage that. Or if I'm worried about sequence of return risk or what the market is going to do, I can annuitize it. I give that insurance company my $150,000, I no longer own that. And we're in a relationship and they say, we're gonna pay you $500 a month for however long you're gonna live. That's how they work. Typically, because they're through an insurance company, they have very, very high fees and not as good rates of return. When the economy's doing well, you miss out on a lot of that growth.
Being in the 403B.
Yeah, being in the 403B. So. What was that? Tomorrow it's gonna be individually, so I'll be talking to everyone about their actual pension benefits, their all of the URS stuff, like directly targeted to them. So if you've got questions on how the formula is calculated and what are the investment options and you know, what are my spousal benefits, and that's what I'll be talking about. That one is you, it's like your retirement benefits, it's 9, 10, and 10.